The throne room blazed with light so intense that it should have burned away everything within 100 meters, and Archon. Thelixis had become something terrible and magnificent, and his crystalline body pulsed with stolen power while geometric patterns of pure energy orbited his form like vengeful spirits. Ambassador Yuna Choi walked through the broken doors, and she did not flinch from the light. "You dare to approach me now?" Thelixis thundered. "I have become more powerful than I have been in 10,000 years, and I will destroy your fleet and your planet and your entire species." "I know," Yuna said calmly. "You have become very powerful, and you have done so by killing thousands of innocent servants and draining them of every drop of life they possessed." She walked closer, and her shadow stretched long across the floor. "I have come to ask you a question," she said. "Questions cannot harm me now," Thelixis declared. "I have enough power to burn for a century without any worship at all." "Then my question should not bother you," Yuna replied. "Here it is, and please consider it carefully." She stopped walking and looked up at the blazing giant before her. "If you are truly divine, then why are you afraid?" Thelixis laughed, but the laugh sounded hollow. "I am not afraid of anything, least of all a primitive creature from a primitive world." "Then why did you need to destroy a moon to intimidate us?" Yuna asked. "A true god would be recognized without demonstrations of power, and a true god would inspire worship through pure divinity, not through fear and violence." "Silence," Thelixis commanded. "Why do you need servants to pray to you constantly?" Yuna continued. "A true god would be complete and perfect and would require nothing from anyone. And yet, you need worship to survive, and without it you fade and die." "I said silence," Thelixis roared, and his light flickered despite all his stolen power. "Why do you punish those who ask questions?" Yuna pressed on. "Truth does not fear examination, and only lies require protection, and only false gods demand unquestioning faith." She took another step forward. "I have studied your history, Archon, and I know what you really are, and you are not gods, and you never were, and you are parasites." Thelixis raised one blazing hand to strike her down, but something stopped him, and it was not mercy, and it was not hesitation. It was doubt. For the first time in 12,000 years, Thelixis felt uncertainty creeping through his crystalline mind, and Yuna's questions had found cracks in the foundation of his identity. "We are eternal," he said, but his voice wavered. "We have ruled since before your species existed." "Eternity is not divinity," Yuna replied softly. "Rocks are eternal and mountains endure for millions of years, but no one worships a stone." She sat down on the floor, cross-legged and relaxed, and she looked like someone settling in for a long conversation with an old friend. "Let me tell you about human history," she said, "because I think you might find it interesting." Thelixis loomed over her, but he did not attack, and some part of him wanted to hear what she would say. "We had kings once who claimed divine right to rule," Yuna began. "They said God had chosen them, and that questioning their authority was questioning heaven itself, and they built magnificent palaces and demanded absolute obedience." She smiled slightly. "They all fell, and every single one of them, and their empires crumbled, and their dynasties ended, and their names are now just footnotes in history books." "We are different," Thelixis insisted. "We are true gods, not mere human pretenders. Are you?" Yuna asked. "You require worship to survive, and you fear questions, and you punish doubt, and you need violence to maintain control, and those are not the qualities of gods, Thelixis, and those are the qualities of tyrants." The stolen power within Thelixis burned fiercely, but it was burning through him too fast, and the energy he had taken was not sustainable, and it was consuming him from within. "What do you want from me, human?" he demanded. "Do you want me to surrender and bow before your primitive species?" "I want nothing from you," Yuna said simply. "I only want you to understand something that humans learned long ago. She looked up at him with eyes that held no fear and no hatred, and only a strange sort of compassion. "Nothing lasts forever," she said. "Not empires, and not kings, and not gods, and not even the stars themselves, and everything that begins must eventually end." Thelixis trembled, and his light flickered wildly. "And when humans accepted this truth, we did not despair," Una continued. "We found peace in it, and we learned that mortality gives meaning to life, and that endings give value to what came before." The power within Thelixis was guttering now, and the stolen energy had burned too hot and left nothing. "But Ash, you could have been so much more," Una said softly. "You had 12,000 years, and you wasted them on tyranny and fear, and you built nothing that will outlast you, and you inspired nothing except hatred." Thelixis tried to respond, but no words came, and his light was fading, and his crystalline body was growing cold. "I'm sorry," Una whispered. "Not for what is happening to you, but for what you could have been and chose not to be." Archon Thelixis, the eternal, the divine, the supreme, ruler of the Celestin Dominion, did not die with a bang or an explosion. He simply faded. His light dimmed and flickered and went out, and his crystalline body grew dark and cold, and then slowly, very slowly, it crumbled to dust across Varanthos Prime and throughout the 40 star systems of the Celestin Dominion. The same scene repeated, and one by one the beings who had called themselves gods faded into darkness, and their crystalline forms collapsed, and their reign ended not with war but with silence. The servant species stood in the ruins of temples and palaces, and they looked around in wonder and disbelief, and for the first time in millennia they were free. Threshold Singer found Una sitting alone in the throne room, surrounded by dust that had once been a god. "You did it," he said with tears streaming down his furry face. "You freed us all. You freed yourselves," Una replied. "All I did was help you remember that you could." He knelt beside her and took her hand. "What do humans want in return for this?" he asked. "What do you expect from us?" Una smiled and squeezed his hand gently. "We want neighbors," she said. "Not worshippers, and not servants, and not subjects, and just neighbors who we can trade with and talk with and learn from and build a future together." In the weeks that followed, the former servant species joined the galactic community as equals, and they rebuilt their societies and rediscovered their histories and began to heal from generations of slavery. A Velith historian named Bright Chorus wrote the definitive account of the fall of the Celestin Dominion, and her final paragraph became famous throughout the galaxy. "The humans did not defeat the Celestins with superior technology or overwhelming military force," she wrote. "They defeated them with something far more powerful, and they refused to be impressed by false divinity, and they taught us to do the same, and in the end the beings who thought themselves gods discovered the most human truth of all. They were mortal after all." The sky above Varanthos Prime filled with ships, and the Celestin armada of 300 crystalline warships was the most powerful fleet in the known galaxy, and each vessel blazed with golden light and carried weapons capable of shattering planets. But they were not alone. From hyperspace came another fleet, ragged and mismatched, and held together by desperation and old hatred. And there were Velith ships that had been hidden for centuries, and Creth dreadnoughts that survivors had kept running through sheer determination, and Marvani scout vessels and distant one cruisers, and 100 other designs from species that the Celestins had thought completely broken. And at the center of this coalition flew 12 human warships, including the carrier Unconquered and the battleship Remember Earth. Admiral Junsiak Beak commanded the human contingent, and he studied the tactical display with steady eyes. "We are outgunned by at least 3 to 1. His tactical officer reported. "Then we will need to be 3 times as clever." Beak replied calmly. The Celestin flagship broadcast across all frequencies, and the voice of Archon, Delixis, thundered through every speaker. "Foolish creatures," he declared, "you bring this pitiful collection of refugees and primitives against the might of the divine, and we will crush you utterly. And then we will purge the galaxy of your corruption." Beak opened his own channel. "This is Admiral Beak of the United Earth Navy," he said. "We do not intend to crush anyone today, and we intend to set your slaves free, and if you want to stop us, you are welcome to try." Delixis laughed, and the sound was terrible. "Your confidence is amusing, human, but confidence cannot stop our weapons and observe what true power looks like." The Celestin flagship fired its main cannon, and a beam of focused energy lanced across space, and it struck one of the mighty Rangers. Kreth dreadnoughts, and the massive vessel exploded in a flash of light and fire. "That was a warning," Delixis said. "Surrender now or watch your fleet burn." Beak did not respond to the Archon, and instead he opened a channel to Ambassador Una, who was still on the surface. "We cannot win a straight fight," he said. "Please tell me your plan." "Is working." Una's voice came back tense but determined. "It is working, but we need more time, and the doubt is spreading but not fast enough." "Then we will buy you time," Beak said. "Whatever it takes." He turned to his crew. "All ships engage and focus on defense and evasion, and our goal is not to destroy them, but to survive long enough for the real weapon to work." The Battle of Varantos Prime began, and it was unlike any battle the galaxy had ever seen. The human ships did not try to match the Celestin firepower because they could not, and instead they danced and dodged and used every trick their pilots could imagine, and the coalition vessels supported them with covering fire and electronic warfare every time a Celestin warship powered up its main weapon. A human vessel would launch decoys or create interference or simply dive into the sensor shadow of an asteroid. The Celestins grew frustrated because their overwhelming power meant nothing if they could not hit their targets. Meanwhile, on the surface of Varantos Prime, the real battle was being fought without weapons. Dohan led teams of human volunteers through the servant districts, and they carried no guns, and they spoke no threats, and all they carried were questions. Why did the Celestins fear questions if the answers would prove their divinity? They asked, why do gods need servants to feed them worship when true gods would be complete in themselves? Why have the Celestins forbidden you from learning history when history would only confirm their eternal reign? The questions spread from district to district, and millions of servant species heard them, and for the first time in generations, they began to think of Velith Elder, who had served the Celestins for 40 years, suddenly stopped in the middle of a prayer. Why am I praying? She asked herself. What has prayer ever given me except shorter life and tired bones? A Kreth soldier, whose family had served in the Temple Guard for 20 generations, looked at his crystal-powered weapon and wondered why gods needed soldiers at all. A young Morvani student who had been taught that questioning was the greatest sin realized that any truth which could not survive questions was no truth at all. Each doubt was a small crack in the foundation of Celestin power, and together millions of cracks became a collapse. In orbit, the Celestin warships began to flicker and dim, just like their masters had in the throne room, and their weapons lost accuracy, and their shields weakened, and their formations fell into disarray. What is happening to us? Demanded the captain of a Celestin cruiser. Our power reserves are dropping, and we cannot maintain combat readiness. The answer came from the planet below, where billions of beings had stopped worshipping and started thinking. Thelixis watched his fleet weaken, and rage burned through his crystalline form, and he knew what was causing this, and he knew there was only one way to stop it. Bring all power to my command, he ordered. Every ship, every soldier, every servant who still believes in me will give their energy to me now. It was forbidden, and it was monstrous, and had not been done in 10,000 years because the cost was so terrible. throughout. The fleet Celestine officers reluctantly obeyed, and they opened channels to their masters, and they let the Lixis draw power directly from them. The servants on those ships died instantly as their life energy was ripped away, and thousands of Valith and Crethan Morvani collapsed where they stood. But the Lixis grew brighter and stronger, and his crystalline body expanded with stolen power until he blazed like a small sun. Now, he roared across all frequencies. Now you will see what a true god can do. He prepared to unleash destruction that would crack the planet itself, and everyone on it would die, and the doubt would end, and his reign would continue forever. But Ambassador Yuna Choi was already walking toward his throne room, and she carried no weapons, and she had no plan to fight. She had something far more dangerous than weapons. She had the truth. Dawn rose over Varanthos Prime, and golden light spilled across the crystal towers, and Ambassador Yuna Choi walked toward the Temple of Eternal Radiance with a book tucked under her arm. Do Hwan had argued against this plan until his voice went hoarse, but Yuna knew it was the only way, and she had to face the Archon again, and she had to do it alone. The temple guards watched her approach with expressions that might have been confusion, if their crystalline faces could show emotion, and no one had expected the humans to return willingly after the display of power the night before. I request an audience with the Archon, Yuna announced. I'd bring a gift for his divine consideration. The guards hesitated, and then one of them vanished inside and returned moments later with permission for her to enter. The throne room blazed with even more light than before, and Delixis sat upon his throne radiating smug satisfaction, and his court of lesser Celestines flanked him on either side. So the little humans have reconsidered, Delixis said, and his voice dripped with condescension. You have witnessed true divine power, and you have come to surrender. I've come to offer a gift, Yuna replied calmly, a token of cultural exchange from my people to yours. She held up the book, and its plain cover looked almost absurd in the magnificent throne room. What is this primitive object? Thelixis asked with amusement. It is a collection of human philosophy, Yuna said, the greatest thoughts of our greatest thinkers, and I wish to share some of these thoughts with you if you will permit. Thelixis gestured lazily with one gleaming hand. Speak then, little creature, and entertain us with your primitive wisdom. Yuna opened the book to a marked page and began to read. The philosopher Nija wrote that God is dead, and God remains dead, and we have killed him. The words hung in the air like poison, and something strange happened. Thelixis flickered. It was subtle and lasted only a heartbeat, but his blazing light dimmed slightly, as if a cloud had passed over a sun. Yuna continued reading, and she shared passages about skepticism and secular ethics and the rejection of divine authority, and with each passage the Archon's light flickered again and again. Stop, Thelixis commanded, and for the first time his voice held something other than arrogance. This is heresy and corruption, and you dare to speak such words in my presence. These are simply ideas, Yuna said innocently, merely the thoughts of humans who lived and died on a small planet far from here, and surely such primitive philosophy cannot threaten a true god. She saw the trap snap shut in Thelixis's mind, and he could not admit that mere words affected him without admitting he was not truly divine. Continue then, he said through clenched teeth. We are curious to hear more of this human foolishness. Yuna read for another hour, and she watched the Celestines grow increasingly agitated, and their lights flickered and dimmed, and some of them began to look almost ill, but Yuna's true weapon was not the book itself. While she held the Archon's attention, Do Hwan was moving through the servant quarters, and he carried no weapons and he spoke no threats, and all he did was ask questions. Have you ever wondered why gods need sleep? He asked a group of Velith workers. They stared at him in confusion and fear. Have you ever wondered why divine beings require food and servants and worship? He continued. A true god would need nothing at all, would they not? The questions were simple, but they planted seeds of doubt, and one by one the servants began to whisper. Among themselves, a Kreth worker asked her supervisor why the Archon had needed to destroy a moon to prove his power, and a true god would simply be known without proof. A young Morvani child asked his mother why the Celestins punished those who asked questions if the answers would only confirm their divinity. Each question was tiny, and alone they meant nothing, but together they spread like fire through dry grass. In the throne room, Phalixis suddenly clutched his chest, and his light dimmed dramatically. "What is happening?" he demanded, and real fear crept into his voice. "What have you done, human?" "I have done nothing," Una said truthfully. "I have only shared ideas, and ideas cannot harm a true god." But they both knew she was lying, and they both knew exactly what was happening. Throughout the city of Varanthos, prime millions of servant species were beginning to doubt for the first time in thousands of years, and each doubt was a tiny wound, and together they were bleeding. The Celestins dry, seize her. Talixis roared, "Seize all the humans and execute them immediately." Guards rushed forward, but before they could reach Una, a massive tremor shook the temple, and alarms began blaring throughout the city. A Celestin messenger burst into the throne room with panic radiating from his crystalline form. "Archon, the servant populations are in chaos," he reported. "They are asking questions and refusing to pray, and our power reserves are rapidly." Delixis rose from his throne, and his full terrible height cast shadows across the chamber. "Then we will burn the contamination out," he declared. "Summon the fleet, and we will sterilize this world, and then we will find Earth, and we will destroy every human who has ever lived." He pointed at Una with a finger that blazed like a star. "You have doomed your entire species, little creature, and we will hunt your kind to extinction, and we will make an example of Earth that will terrify the galaxy for the next 1,000,000 years. Una smiled, and it was the calm smile of someone who held a hidden card. "You may try," she said, "but I think you will find that humanity has made some friends during our brief time among the stars." High above Varanthos, prime sensors detected massive hyperspace signatures, and the Celestin fleet began powering up their weapons. But something else was coming, and it was not human, and it was very, very angry. Every species the Celestins had conquered over 12,000 years had survivors who escaped, and those survivors had children and grandchildren who carried bitter memories and hatred. And when humanity reached out to offer them a chance for revenge, they answered with every ship they could muster. The war for the soul of the galaxy was about to begin. The data chip contained coordinates and nothing else, and Doan studied the location on his tactical display, while the shuttle carried them back to the steady hand. "It points to somewhere beneath the city," he said, "deep underground and far from any official structures. Someone wants to meet us in secret." Una said, "And they risked their life to make contact. It could be a trap. It could be," she agreed. "But did you see the look in that servant's eyes when he gave me this chip?" Dohan nodded slowly because he had noticed the same thing. And fear mixed with desperate hope was not the expression of someone laying a trap. "I will go alone," he said. "Absolutely not," Una replied. "We go together or not at all." They argued about it for another hour. But Una won because she always did when it mattered, and when the planet's night cycle began, they slipped away from the steady hand. In a small unmarked pod, the coordinates led them to an ancient drainage tunnel that opened into a vast underground cavern, and hundreds of the small furry servants had gathered there along with members of other species, and they all watched the humans approach with wide, frightened eyes. One servant stepped forward, and Una recognized him as the one who had passed her the chip, and he trembled as he spoke. "I am called Threshold Singer," he said in halting but clear English, "and we have waited so long for someone like you to arrive." "Someone like us?" Una asked gently. "Someone who refused to kneel," Threshold Singer said, and his voice cracked with emotion. In 12,000 years, no species has ever stood before the Archon and refused, and you cannot know what this means to us. He gestured at the gathered beings around him, and Una saw the same desperate hope in every face. Please sit, Threshold Singer said, and I will tell you the truth that the Celestins have hidden from the galaxy. They sat on the cold stone floor, and the small alien began to speak. My people were called the Valith, and we traveled between stars before the Celestins found us. He said, we had science and art and freedom, and we were happy. His dark eyes grew distant with pain. Then the Celestins came, and they told us we would be uplifted, and they said it was an honor, and at first we believed them. He pulled back the sleeve of his robe and revealed his arm, and embedded in the gray fur was a crystal implant that pulsed with faint light. This is what upliftment means, he said bitterly. They put these inside us when we are born, and the crystals connect to our minds, and they harvest our emotions. Harvest? Doan leaned forward with growing alarm. What do you mean, harvest? The Celestins are not truly alive as you understand it. Threshold Singer explained. They are ancient machines of crystal and light, and they require psychic energy to sustain themselves, and this energy comes from worship and fear and devotion. Una felt cold horror spreading through her chest. They feed on you, she whispered. Yes, and the more intensely we worship them, the more energy they drain from us, and it shortens our lives by decades, and we die young and tired and empty. While they grow ever more powerful, a Velith female stepped forward with a small child clutched against her chest. My grandmother remembered when our people lived past 100 years. She said, now we are old at 40 and dead at 50 because they take everything from us. Una looked around the cavern at all the worn faces and tired eyes, and she understood now why they had risked so much to contact the humans. Every species here has the same story. Threshold Singer continued. The Kreth were builders, and the Morvani were philosophers, and the distant ones were poets, and now we are all just cattle being slowly drained of life. Why can you not resist? Dawan asked. There are millions of you, and only thousands of them. The implants, Threshold Singer said with despair in his voice. They monitor our thoughts, and if we feel doubt or anger toward the Celestins, the implants cause terrible pain, and most of us cannot even question our masters without suffering. He looked at Una with sudden intensity. But you have no implants, and you felt nothing when you refused the Archon, and this is why you are so important. We are just one ship. Una said softly, we cannot defeat an empire. You do not need to defeat them with weapons, Threshold Singer said, and excitement crept into his voice. The Celestins have a weakness that they have kept secret for millennia. He leaned closer, and his next words were barely a whisper. Doubt is poison to them, and when the beings they feed upon begin to question their divinity, the Celestins grow weak, and if enough doubt spreads, their power fades. Suddenly the entire cavern shook, and dust rained down from above, and a deep rumbling sound rolled through the earth. Everyone froze in terror. What was that? Una demanded. One of the Kreth workers, a tall insectoid being with compound eyes, rushed in from a tunnel entrance. The Archon has destroyed the 7th moon, she announced with shock in her voice. He has sent a message to the human ship demanding immediate surrender. Dawan grabbed his communicator and contacted the steady hand. Report, he ordered. Lieutenant Kim's voice came back shaky but controlled. Sir, the Celestins just used some kind of focused energy weapon, and they vaporized an entire moon in seconds, and they are saying this is a demonstration of divine power, and that we must surrender by dawn or face annihilation. Una and Dawan exchanged a long look. We cannot fight that kind of power, he said quietly. No, Una agreed, and then a strange smile crossed her face. But Threshold Singer just told us we do not need to fight them at all. She turned back to the Velith, who watched her with trembling hope. You said doubt is their weakness. She said, "Then we will give them doubt, and we will spread it so far and so fast that they will choke on it." For the first time in his entire life, Threshold Singer smiled, and it transformed his face from tired despair to something almost joyful. "Tell us what to do," he said, "and we will follow." Una began to explain her plan, and around her the seeds of revolution took root in hearts that had forgotten what freedom felt like. The diplomatic vessel's steady hand dropped out of hyperspace above Varanthos Prime, and Ambassador Una Choi pressed her face against a viewport in wonder. The planet below shimmered like a giant jewel spinning slowly in the darkness of space, and massive crystal towers rose from its surface, so tall they nearly touched the upper atmosphere, and golden light pulsed through every structure like a heartbeat. "Beautiful," she whispered. Her security chief Dohan Park stood beside her with his arms crossed and his expression hard. "Beautiful things can still be dangerous," he said. Una nodded because she knew he was right, and she had read every report about the Celestine Dominion before accepting this mission, and the reports painted a troubling picture. The Celestines had ruled over 40 star systems for 12,000 years, and dozens of species lived under their control, and every single one of them worshipped the Celestines as living gods. Humanity had only discovered faster than light travel 2 centuries ago, and they were still newcomers to the galactic stage, and when the Celestines sent an invitation for diplomatic contact, the United Earth Council decided they could not refuse. "We are being hailed," announced Lieutenant Sora Kim from the communications station. "Accepted," Una said. The view screen flickered, and a face appeared that made everyone on the bridge catch their breath. The Celestine ambassador was made of living crystal, and light flowed through his translucent body like liquid fire, and his eyes were 2 burning stars set in a face of geometric perfection, and when he spoke his voice resonated with harmonic tones that seemed to vibrate in the bones. "Welcome, travelers from the young world called Earth," he said. "The Archon Thelixis has graciously agreed to receive you in the Temple of Eternal Radiance, and you will descend to the surface immediately, and you will present yourselves before his divine magnificence." The transmission ended without waiting for a response. Dowan let out a slow breath through his teeth. "That was not a request," he said. "No, it was not," Una agreed. "But we came here to talk, and talking requires meeting, and so we will meet." She selected a small delegation of 5 people, including herself and Dowan, and they boarded the shuttle and descended through the curved golden clouds of Varanthos Prime. The Temple of Eternal Radiance was the largest structure Una had ever seen, and it made the greatest buildings of Earth look like toys, and crystalline spires reached toward the sky like fingers grasping for heaven, and light danced across every surface in patterns that seemed almost alive. Servants waited at the entrance to guide them inside, and Una studied these beings carefully because they were not Celestines. They were small mammalian creatures covered in soft gray fur, with large dark eyes that looked at the floor and never at the humans, and they wore simple white robes and moved with the careful practiced steps of those who had learned long ago to never draw attention. Other species worked in the background too, and Una counted at least 7 different kinds of aliens, sweeping floors and polishing crystal and carrying supplies, and not one of them looked up as the humans passed. The throne room took her breath away despite her determination to remain composed. Archon Thelixis sat upon a throne of pure light, and his body blazed with power that made Una squint, and he was 3 times the height of a human, and his crystalline form was covered in intricate patterns that pulsed with energy, and a crown of floating geometric shapes orbited his head like planets around a sun. "Kneel before the Archon," commanded a voice from somewhere in the blinding radiance. Una remained standing, and so did her delegation. "We greet you with respect, Archon Thelixis," she said in a clear, calm voice. "The people of Earth thank you for this audience, and we come seeking peaceful relations and fair trade between our civilizations." A long silence followed, and Yuna felt the weight of ancient attention pressing down upon her like a physical force. "You do not kneel," Thalixis said, and his voice filled the entire chamber like thunder. "All beings kneel before the Celestine dominion, for we are eternal, and we are divine, and we have guided the lesser races toward enlightenment since before your species learned to make fire. We mean no disrespect." Yuna replied, "But humans do not kneel before anyone, and this is our way." Thalixis leaned forward on his throne, and his light intensified until Yuna had to shield her eyes. "Your way is the way of children stumbling in darkness," he said. "But fear not, young ones, for we offer you a great gift, and we offer you upliftment." "Upliftment?" Yuna asked. "You will join our blessed family," Thalixis explained, and something in his voice sounded almost hungry. "We will elevate your primitive species, and we will teach you true purpose, and you will know the joy of serving divine will." Yuna had prepared for many outcomes, but this was the one she had feared most. "We are grateful for your offer," she said carefully, "but humanity must respectfully decline, and we seek partnership, not submission, and we recognize no divine authority over our people." Another silence stretched through the throne room, and Yuna could feel her heart pounding in her chest. Then Thalixis laughed, and the sound was like crystal shattering and reforming over and over. "How delightful," he said. "You refuse the greatest honor any species can receive, and you do so with such innocent confidence. And it has been many ages since we encountered such amusing stubbornness." He waved one gleaming hand in dismissal. "You have one solar cycle to reconsider, young ones," he said. "When the light rises again, you will return, and you will accept your proper place in the order of existence. And if you do not, then you will be corrected." The audience was over, and servants appeared to escort the humans out, and Yuna walked in silence with her mind racing through possibilities. As they passed through a narrow corridor, she felt something brush against her hand, and she looked down to see one of the small furry servants pressing a tiny object into her palm, and his large dark eyes met hers for just a moment. What she saw in those eyes made her stomach clench. It was hope, desperate and terrified hope. The servant vanished into the shadows, and Yuna closed her fingers around the object and kept walking outside the temple. She finally looked at what she had been given, and it was a small data chip etched with symbols she did not recognize. "What is that?" Dohwan asked quietly. "I think it might be a message," Yuna said, "and I think we have more allies on this world than the Celestines realize." She looked back at the Temple of Eternal Radiance, where the Archon sat upon his throne of light waiting for humanity to bow. They would be waiting a very long time,